Deathpixie disclaimer. This video was originally recorded in September 2024. There is swearing and profanity. Sources are listed in the description. This video is not monetized. Any ads you see provide revenue to the hosting site, not the creators. If you made it this far, geez, you have a lot of patience.
Dance Pixie, dancing on the lip of madness!
Welcome to Shitty PowerPoint Theater. Dignity not included.
Macdonald. So he was part of the Liberal Conservative Party. He had 2 terms that you can see. He lived a fairly good long life. He had 2 wives and 3 children. Of note was his son, Hugh John Macdonald. Huge John. That's funny. Anyway, what you are going to notice is we're going to, as we get closer and closer to now, we will have more and more detail, mostly because that relates into the political landscape of today. So yeah, there you go. So some pros and cons on Sir John A. Macdonald. One thing to note about him, at this time, under the British North America Act, only men 21 years of age or older who own property are able to vote in federal elections.
Yeah.
So people who are excluded from voting provincially cannot vote federally. So that's a little bit of information going on there. So pro, Confederation, unified nation, distinct nation. There you go. Had a predominant view of Canada as a separate nation. The Treaty of Washington, the railway overall was a good thing because it was connecting all of Canada. If you saw, British Columbia joined before the prairies were made separated. So it was important to get access to British Columbia early on. Building and guiding of a successful national government for the new Dominion. That's a big accomplishment. Protective tariff of national policy. And then Arctic territories joining Confederation as well. But there was a con. The ordered military takedown of the Northwest Rebellion and the execution of Louis Riel, which resulted in Métis and Western Province alienation. That was a bad thing.
Yeah, kinda.
And we spoke about that, actually.
Yes, we did. There's no reason to go.
Yeah. Place limits on travel of Indigenous people. And you're probably asking yourself, why would they care? Most of them were nomadic. And they would have areas that they would stay in the seasons according to where prey would be or environmental elements and things like that. So placing the limits of travel on them is also, you're limiting how they survive without giving them tools of survival. There's the Pacific Scandal, which is also known as the McGreevy-Langevin Scandal. The residential school system. So he commissioned a politician, Nicholas Flood Davin, to write a report regarding the industrial boarding school system in the United States. Remember how I said the United States did the same thing? They did. So this was called the Report on Industrial Schools for Indians and Half-Breeds, or the Davin Report. And my voice sounds like that because, oh boy, are the times showing with that title. It was submitted to Ottawa March 14th, 1879, and it made the case for the Canadian government and the Catholic Church to implement aggressive assimilation that was persuaded by the U.S. president at the time, Ulysses S. Grant. So Davin, who wrote the report, only visited one industrial school in Minnesota before submitting his findings and concluded that it was the best way to civilize Indigenous peoples, basically to start with raising the children away from their families so that they could be kept constantly within the circle of civilized conditions. Delightful. So that led to 1883 Parliament approved $43,000 for 3 industrial schools, and the first was the Battleford Industrial School opening on December 1st, 1883. That is the start of the residential school system. So yeah. We also had the Chinese immigration tax, which is also known as the Chinese head tax. You want them to build the railway, but you don't want them coming into the country.
Nah.
Apparently that's how we do that. There are multiple bribery allegations.
Multiple
bribery allegations. So
if you think that modern politics is bad for bribery allegations, it's not like this.
I got nothing on that. But what I think this serves to illustrate is that, yes, there's a certain amount that we have to talk to about opinions of the times that we can look back to now and say this was wrong. I have always been of the opinion that regardless of racial status, taking children away from their families unnecessarily, because there's a history of beating children at home too.
There is a big difference between what the residential school systems did and individual case-by-case basis.
Yes. So I tend to say it's never a good thing. I do recognize that for a lot of people, it was very normalized that at a young age, your kids go to boarding school and you don't see them. So to a lay person who didn't know the intricacies of this, that's what it would have looked like. Like, oh, why can't they be thankful? They're going to this fancy boarding school. Well, that's not what it was. So
no, it was not.
It was definitely not that. It was probably closer to a workhouse.
I wouldn't even say workhouse.
It's prison?
Sort of, yeah. There we get a lot closer, because a lot of the same allegations that can happen within the prison systems definitely happen in the residential school system.
Oh.
It is a terrible, terrible system.
Yeah. But I just wanted to explain that, because if you didn't know the intricacies of this, if you were just like a lay person and didn't care, it sounds like, oh, well, they're going to like a boarding school and they're getting the best of education. My kids don't get that, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
Which affects, how long this was allowed to go on for. So,
yeah.
But I also think that what this illustrates is a definite like dichotomy of people.
Yeah.
Humans are multifaceted. It's very hard to be a bastion of light, as it were. So
yeah.
But yeah, lots of bribery allegations. So I do give the Prime Minister some of my favorite quotes, and this one is my favorite from JohnAMacdonald. When fortune empties her chamber pot on your head, smile and say we are going to have a summer shower. It's such a good quote.
It is.
So the Great Coalition, he agreed with a proposal from his political rival, George Brown, that the parties unite to the Great Coalition, which was to seek federal and political reform. And that's what got us into the establishment of Canada as a nation, basically. His first political position was as an alderman, and he came to it the traditional way. By being the candidate who supplied the most alcohol to the voting constituents. So, there's history there.
Yeah.
Before we jump into,
the
elephant in the room. Yeah. I will say, one of his quotes that's, quite eloquent is, if I had influence over the minds of the people of Canada, any power over their intellect, I would leave them this legacy. Whatever you do, adhere to the Union. We are a great country. We shall become one of the greatest in the universe if we preserve it. We shall sink into insignificance and adversity if we suffer to be broken. So from the outset, there was this we are Canadian type attitude.
Yeah.
But without the kind of aggressive vibrato of the US, if that makes sense.
What I find interesting about this quote and about John A. as a whole. Take all the bad stuff away, take all the drinking away, and take many of the positive things away too. John A. was interested in building up a notion of Canada and protecting it.
Mm-hmm.
Not in terms of privatization or outsourcing. His government was very interested in protectionist policies. He was very, very pro-tariff, for example.
Mm-hmm.
This is a conservative in the 1800s. And if you go further and further and further into Canadian politics, I want to see how badly that traditional conservatism gets bastardized by both parties as we move into neoliberalist politics. Because it's interesting.
Sorry, are you leaving Christian conservatives out of the conversation too?
Oh, for right now, we'll get to them.
Okay.
We'll get to them in about 100 years.
Sorry, by Christian, I should say evangelical. Evangelical Christian.
But no, we've got another 125 years before that seriously starts to take effect.
Mm-hmm.
So let's just enjoy that century in a bit.
So there is the elephant in the room, which was his drinking. That was, I think, his major, because politicians like to attack personally. That was the major point. He is known to have been drunk for many of his debates in Parliament.
Yes.
In a particular debate, he was so drunk he vomited while on stage. And his opponent pointed this out and said, "Is this the man you want running your country, a drunk?" Macdonald collected himself, got up and replied, "I get sick, not because of drink, but because I am forced to listen to the ranting of my honorable opponent." I'm just like, dude.
That was quick.
Yeah, it was very quick. I have a couple other quotes if you want to hear them.
Yeah, absolutely I do.
So anybody may support me when I am right. What I want is someone that will support me when I am wrong. Give me better wood and I will make you a better cabinet. That's in reference to, not literal cabinets, but the governmental cabinet. Anyway, just in case somebody wasn't getting it. Never write a letter if you can help it, and never destroy one.
Yep.
And finally, yes, but the people would prefer John A. drunk than George Brown sober. So, difficult person to be friends with.
Yeah, he wasn't exactly the most popular prime minister, but
no, he had a very clear vision of a unified, distinct Canada. And protecting Canada through tariffs, like you said. So, again, it gets interesting when we get later on. So,
yeah.
Now, things are going to get stressful as we go on. So I figured when we go through the Prime Minister's CVs and history, I'd have a nice picture for everyone to look at. And I chose the sexy moose. Because you're going to need it later. You're really going to need it later.
Yeah.
So what did John A. Macdonald do? He was an alderman in Kingston's 4th Ward, like I mentioned. He was a lawyer. He was an expert on election law and parliamentary procedures. So quite qualified. Queen's Counsel, Receiver General, Attorney General. Then he became Premier, and then he was Prime Minister. So he had a very lengthy career and knew what he was doing. And you do see that in terms of formulating all the basis for Canada's government and electoral process, etc. So I don't want to say that he wasn't qualified. He was. You can see it. It's just he did have his devices and his vices. And as a man of the time, there are certain cons that, unsavory stuff, But like you said, there were definitely some big positives that we don't see in the remnants of that political party anymore. Now then, is there anything you want to say on John A. Macdonald before I move on?
Sir John Macdonald, keep him away from your railways and people.
But if you want a drink,
Yeah. This is the guy you want to have as a drinking buddy. Why? Because he can outdrink you.
also
And
he's
you want
witty
to know what
when
that
drunk.
means? Competition.
Also, he's witty when drunk, which, is...
Yes. It's worth more than you might think in the casual bar scene.
Yeah. So the next person, you're going to notice he actually doesn't have Sir attached to his name. Most of the early prime ministers do. He doesn't have this because he refused that title, because he had his own feelings about getting titles and how that creates hierarchy. Remember, the British class system was very, very lockdown exclusive type thing. I'm actually impressed with India for having an even more strict class caste system, but I digress.
Hey, this is Trapdoor Crabsworth for deathpixie. If you liked our content, please like this video and subscribe. And if you want to see more, just check out our links in the description. Do it. 200 Myry will kill you.